This is TJ with Tech Made Easy. Welcome to the channel. My channel is all about making things affordable, practical, and easy. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about the 4 Linux distros that I think are the easiest for people to switch to Linux to. No matter what the reason that you're thinking about switching to Linux, there are other distros that are also out there that you could use as well. These are just my personal opinion on what a beginner should start with. They're all Debian-based. There's so much help with Debian-based distros that's out there. And as a new user, I wouldn't necessarily recommend an Arch distro for various reasons. But regardless, Linux today is so easy to use. You don't have to touch the terminal. I dare say that it's almost as easy or easier than Windows. The biggest challenge that you have today switching to Linux is, can you get all the apps that you need on Linux that you have in Windows? And there are many Windows apps that are actually on Linux, like Zoom, Spotify, VLC, but there are also 2 popular Microsoft Office compatible programs, LibreOffice and OnlyOffice. And gaming today on Linux is so much better than it was before. 95% of games work on Linux. It's the multi-shooter ones that don't work on Linux. So hopefully this will help you in making that transition. Let's get started. Okay, here we are at our first desktop. We're going to be talking about Pop! OS. So Pop! OS is really known in the Linux community for a long time. It's known for one of the easier ones to use. A lot of beginners started with Pop! OS, and it's just a very easy, what they call a GNOME or GNOME desktop. And so what you have here, usually it's in the center here. Your menus are in the center here, and we show our applications right here, and it's got them all separated into Office, System, Utilities, and then there's create a folder. So let's go home here, and in our home we've got settings here that we can go into. Let me just go into the settings for a minute here. So in settings, this is how you get to settings with Linux. Now depending on the distro will depend on how the settings panel looks. A lot of them have this setting panel where the options are on the side here, but that can be a little different from distro to distro, and how it's organized will be different from distro to distro. But you get to all your stuff here, just similar to Windows. And we're going to go into the settings of each one of these I'm going to show today, just so you can see the kind of the differences, how they're laid out. But this is our settings panel here. Now, so let's go ahead and minimize this. Now, what we have is we have our file manager here. Every distro comes, so with Linux, and if you don't know with Linux, everything that you do is really pretty much in the home folder. The rest of the system is meant for your files to be installed, your programs to be installed, your operating system. So mostly everything you do is right here in the home folder. You save all of your files here. Very similar to Windows, obviously. So our downloads are here, documents, desktop, so on and so forth. Now, file managers in Linux, every distro might use a different file manager than other ones. So I actually have my favorite file manager, and I'll get into that as we get into the last desktop that we're going to go over here. But most of them operate the same, and so let's just go ahead and go into let's go into the App Store. Now with Linux, these app stores are going to look just a little bit different. And excuse me when I say app store, it's really an app manager. I'm so used to saying app store because you don't really buy anything in the app store here. All the apps on Linux are free in the app manager. I'm not saying that there isn't software that you can't buy out there, that there is an expense to that, but those are specific proprietary applications. But most of your applications on Linux are free, and you can find most of them in the software manager. In Linux today, you very rarely have to go to the terminal. You can find all of your applications here, and you're going to notice here that there's Firefox installed here. Firefox is usually a default file browser for most Linux distros, but say you want Google, you just type in Google here, and it'll pull up Google, and now you can install Google Chrome just right from the app manager. Now, so it's very easy to install apps You don't have to even go search for them in the web. Now, there is an occasion where with Linux you do have to maybe find a Linux app through the web, but even that is easy to install. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to go to the terminal to install apps. I know that a lot of times, maybe if you've looked at Linux being demoed before, a lot of people go into the terminal and they start installing apps. But what I have found for me, most of the time when I'm going to the terminals, when I'm creating a server, because the server software may only be able to be installed from the terminal. So that's how you install stuff, is through the app manager on Linux. And again, we'll take a look at these app managers on the different distros that we're going to look at. But everything is point and click here, just like you would in Windows. And so let's just go to Firefox here. What I want to just show you here really quick, I've looked up some videos here that there's tons of videos on Pop! OS, what to do after installing it, how to install it, so on and so forth. And again, what I would say is if you don't know, even after this, right, even after I show these 4 distros, if you're not sure which one, go on YouTube and Google all 4 of them and get a flavor that way. So here's their website right here. What I did want to show you here with Pop! OS, and Pop! OS is done by System 76. They make hardware as well and sell Pop! OS with their hardware. But when you go to the download button, they're going to give you an option here. Do you have an NVIDIA card? If you have an NVIDIA card, just click on that download and it'll download the drivers for your NVIDIA card. Otherwise, you just click here. And one thing you need to realize in Linux, most of the drivers are what they call baked into the kernel. And so most of your stuff you're going to find is just going to work. You don't have to install drivers. So one other feature on all Linux desktops are virtual desktops. A lot of Linux people use virtual desktops. Windows has started to put virtual desktops into Windows now, but to access them here, there's only 2 of them here, but this is how you would access it in Pop! OS. And sometimes how you access your virtual desktops is different from distro to distro. So another feature of Pop! OS is they do have this tile manager that you can turn on. Now this tile manager, you can actually install it on other Linux distros as well if it's not installed already. But this is one that Pop! OS designed for their particular operating system. But again, a lot of things in Linux are shared, so you can actually install a tile manager on the other distros if that's something that you want. Some of them also come with those tile managers already installed. Okay, so now let's look at our next distro, and this one's Zorin OS. And Zorin OS, I really like Zorin OS. I hadn't looked at it for a long time, and a few months ago they came out with their, and it might have been more than a few months ago, they came out with Zorin OS 17. And so I decided to give it a look, and it's very snappy. It works very fast. I really like the way how snappy it is. And if we look here at the file manager, again, it's going to be organized the same. You're going to have the same folders here, just like you did with the other one. And again, and this is probably the same file manager that was in the other one, because both of these operating systems, or these distros, are based upon the GNOME interface. The next 2 that we're going to look at are not based on those interfaces. So, but the one thing that I really like about this is, well, let's just go into the store for a minute here. So let's go ahead and let's look at their store here. And again, this is their store. It looks a little different, but all the stores will actually have categories as well. So if we want to create, or if we want to do work, you can go into those and it'll refresh that with all the apps with work. That's going to take a minute to refresh. I haven't been in there yet. And so, but if you, one thing you're going to notice here again, if we take a look at apps here in Office, there's LibreOffice. And maybe, and again, we have Firefox installed, but maybe we want to use OnlyOffice. So we type in OnlyOffice here, and OnlyOffice, then we click on OnlyOffice, and again, now, again, in this one as well, you have the flat hub. You have the flat hub option. Now, this one here is going to have snaps, and like I said, I'm going to go over these more. What to know when you're switching to Linux, and the way apps work here is one of those things we're going to go over. But the thing that I would do the thing that I would do, and even in Pop! OS and in this one, you'll notice it says Flatpak was the default. And so, like I said, if you don't know which one, just install the Flatpak. I really like the way that Zorin OS functions, the way it's laid out. So really quick, let's go to the Zorin OS, and it's just going to show you the desktop here. But I want to go to the download section because you're going to need to know this. And I'm going to have all the links and everything to all these websites that I'm going to, and directly to their download website page as well. But if we go to download, Zorin OS, the first thing that's going to appear, it's going to show you that it's actually $47. But that is their pro version. The version I'm running here is their core version. The core version has everything you need to get started with Linux. The reason why they have a paid one is they put a lot more apps on this one here. And there is a feature I'm going to show you here in a minute. And they put more features of this one application that they have on their desktop in the paid version. But mostly everything in the pro version can be installed from the app manager as well. They just make it convenient and put a whole bunch more apps, and it's ready to go. But the core version is what most people will download. There is an educational one too, and it gives you educational software, so on and so forth. So let me just show you one of the things that Zorin OS gives you. And it's not that you can't modify other Linux desktops. They give you 4 layouts that you can choose from. The paid one gives you 6, I believe 6, maybe 8, I can't remember. But here, so this one's centered my icons here. But now, instead of my programs being organized by category, it's just going to throw them all up here, kind of like an Android phone. And then here's my virtual desktops that I can switch back and forth from, and so on and so forth. So again, just another different layout here. And if you go to this one, and one thing I want to show you here, this layout right here, this GNOME layout, what you're going to notice here is that there's no menus now. There's no icons at the bottom. Some people, some of the GNOME distros that you install, this is how it will show, and it won't even have these icons up here. And so a lot of people like this workflow. You have to hit the Windows key, what they call their super key, to get to your applications and your virtual desktops this way. And so it's just for those that like this kind of layout. Again, they give that option that's available to you as well. So out of the box, it just gives you some other layouts to choose from. So I'm going to change this back to the Zorin default layout, which is this one. Actually, it's this one right here. And when you try this interface, you're going to notice how snappy it is. Now, one thing that I will say too is, see how we have on the other desktop, we didn't have these folders, we didn't have our home folder and our trash there. All of these different distros, you can go ahead and choose whether or not to have those on there or not. I'm going to show that on one of the other ones because it works basically the same on all of them. But one thing I do want to show on this one before we leave this one is, let's go into downloads for a minute. Now, one thing about Linux is Linux does not run Windows apps natively, but they do have a translation program called Wine. With Wine, you can run some Windows apps, but I'm just to let you know that not all of them work, but there are some that do work. And so what Zorin has done, they've kind of included an install using Wine, so you don't have to go and install Wine or Bottles to run a Windows app. It's built into the operating system, so you just click on the executable file here, and then you just say install Windows app support, and it'll go ahead and install that application, getting all the things that you need from Windows to run that on Linux. Now, this one does work on this. This is Notepad++, and it does work. This compatibility layer. And again, Windows apps are just hit and miss. So any Windows apps that you want to use in Linux, I would try to find a substitute for it. And I know that sometimes that's hard because the substitute may not be exactly like the one that you use, like the Office suites. They may not have all the functions of Microsoft Office, but pretty close. And especially the Office suites, if you're not running a lot of macros and Word and very complicated Excel formulas, you can very easily switch over to LibreOffice or OnlyOffice and run those as your office. Or if you're using Google to do that, you can use Google to do that as well, using the Google apps. Okay, so this is KDE Plasma. Now this KDE Plasma, I'm not at full screen here, 1080p, because I'm running this in a virtual machine, and KDE Plasma doesn't always like to work very well in a virtual machine. I probably should have installed it on hardware so I could show this the way it really is, but this is just a brief introduction to these programs. Anyway, let's look at the file manager here. Here we have Dolphin is their file manager. We go home here. We'll have our typical folders here, just like all the others. And now, I will say this much, in the Linux world, a lot of people like the Dolphin file manager. It's my second favorite file manager. But let's just go in here and let's go to, I didn't go to the settings in Zorin. It's pretty much the same as Pop! OS, and this one here, you'll notice the settings are on the side as well. But KDE Plasma is a way different desktop experience than Pop! OS and Zorin. It's very customizable. If we go in here to appearance and themes, and this is how you would change this. I didn't go into dark mode in Zorin OS, but you can go into dark mode in Zorin OS just like you can here. You notice how it changes the background to match the dark theme. It does the same thing in Zorin OS as well. Let's just go ahead and go back to this. But the thing about KDE Plasma is one of the out-of-the-box most customizable desktops there is, and I'm not going to get into that here. But people that really like to customize your desktop, and it's not that you can't do the others, but out of the box, this one gives you a lot of options of customizing your desktop. And so, I mean, we're talking down to, let's go back down here. We'll go to themes. We're talking your application styles, and it only shows 3 here, but you can actually go and download hundreds of different configurations for all of these styles here. So you would say get new, and it'll go in and it'll pull in a whole bunch of options for you to use. Just so you know though, try this first when you first do an install, because some of those can break the system. It does happen. But anyway, this is probably, I would say, in the Linux community, and we're talking about distros right now, a lot of your distros offer a KDE option for their desktop. So now let's look at their app store or app manager, and it's called Discovery. And it's laid out. You got your options here, or you can go look up something here, like let's look up Zoom really quick. If you run Zoom, you'll notice here that it has a Flatpak version, but then it has another version down here, the Snap version. So again, when you're first using Linux, just if you don't know which one to use, just use the Flatpak. It'd be very helpful if you watch my video on what to know before you switch to Linux, because I will go over that in more detail on why there's different application options when you go to install an app. So this is one of my favorite desktops, is Linux Mint. And I also use the Linux Mint as a daily driver, so I'm a little bit biased towards the Linux Mint, but they have made so many improvements on Linux Mint in the last few years, and Linux Mint has really caught on fire with all the improvements that they're making. It's very customizable as well. KDE is probably the most customizable desktop that there is out of the box, without having to go to the command line and do a lot of stuff. But Linux Mint has a lot of customability to it as well. And so the reason why you weren't seeing the toolbar is it's on auto hide. So let's take the toolbar or the panel off of auto hide, and let's talk about some of the features of Linux Mint. Before we do that, let's go ahead and let's go into the store here. So the Linux store, one of the reasons when I first started using Linux Mint, and again I was using Linux Mint XFCE, not the Cinnamon version, and we'll go over the different versions that they have. I actually moved to the Linux Mint Cinnamon about 6 months ago, because of all the improvements that they've made over the years with the desktop. But one of the things that when I was using Linux Mint XFCE is that I really love the software store. It really has an extensive software store. Now, a lot of the other two distros that I showed you have very good software stores as well. But you just don't have to go to the terminal anymore to install software. Again, if we look up VLC here, you'll see that again there's a couple of versions of VLC, but we just want to do the Flatpak version. So all of the software is just so readily available. They break it up into categories as well. So if we want games, so on and so forth. And you would be surprised how many applications you can find that you might be using on Windows that are really on Linux, like Zoom, Skype, Audacity. You've got many others that are available that are cross-platform. Even the Office platforms like LibreOffice and OnlyOffice are both available on Windows, Linux, and the Mac. And so it makes the transition more and more easier to Linux. And I'm not saying that everything's going to be available on Linux for you to use. You may have to find something that is similar to it. Again, I'm not going to show the functionality of the file manager, but this is my favorite file manager. This is Nemo is the file manager, and they're coming out with a new version of Linux here pretty soon, and they've even made Nemo even more extensive with that version. So now let's just go ahead and let me just show you one thing here. So like I'd mentioned, I was running those other distros in virtual machines, and here's my Linux Mint virtual desktop. Here's Pop! OS running on this workspace. I can navigate with my key to the workspaces, or I can use this function right here to go back and forth. Until I started using Linux, I wasn't really a virtual desktop person. Now I use virtual desktops all the time. This is not the default background of Linux. If I go here, change background, just like in Windows, I can go here. So the default background is really this one here, but I just chose to use this one here as my background. It comes with a whole bunch of different backgrounds as well that you can choose from, many backgrounds. And then also too, on the toolbar here, if I say edit the panel, I can move this into this corner over here, and this is where the default is for this. I just like it in the center, so I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to put it back over here. But also too, I'll go ahead and take this off, and then the default launcher is also here on the left. So this is the default Linux Mint launcher. It kind of looks like Windows 7, very easy to navigate. In fact, if we go into Office here, here's LibreWrite, which is their version of Word, and I also have it here on the panel that I can launch it from. And one thing that I didn't show on all of these distros, I'm going to go ahead and unpin this from the panel, go back in here. And now this launcher here is a different launcher that comes with Linux Cinnamon, and I like it better, so I went ahead and put this launcher here. And so I can just go ahead and add this to the panel now. Now, one thing that I'll go into is I'm going to go into settings for a minute here, and in settings I'm going to go to themes here, because we can put this in dark mode if we want, and we can do a mix if we want to do that. And we can, and these colors here, I can show you a little bit. Actually, I'm going to come back to that in just a sec. So, but in here we have applets. Applets are tools that go on the toolbar or the panel. And then you have disklets, and disklets are just little apps. Like if I want, I can add this clock to here, and I can edit this clock, make it transparent, some other stuff, but just for time's sake I'm going to keep this short. And if you go in here to downloads, there's just tons of applets in here, again, or disklets, excuse me, and those are what they consider widgets that would be on like KDE. So now if I go over here, right mouse click, I can hit the display. All of these you can change your display in here like normal. You can choose different percentages. I never did show that on the others, but you could do that as well on the others. If I click on desktop here, I can go ahead and I can put the the home directory, the trash on there. But I can also right mouse click and get to those. I can just say customize, and I can get to that same thing here as well. And so there, without going through all to customize a desktop, there's just a lot of ways here. Again, this is just an intro to these desktops, but what I want to show here as well, there is one thing I do want to show in the settings here. Let's just go to our settings real quick. We can go to settings here, and again, these settings are different because they're icons, kind of like Windows 7 instead of listed on the side here. But if we go back to themes here and we go to advanced, right now I can change the color of my icons. So there, now let's change to that teal blue. So you have lots of control here on over. You'd be amazed how much control you have over your desktop as far as that customizing go. But customizing your desktop isn't everything about an operating system. Is can you get the apps that you need for that operating system? So, but I chose these four operating systems because these are some of the easiest ones for beginners to use, and then you'll have to decide which apps that you are using on your system that you can use on here and make it your own. But let's really quick, let's go to the Linux Mint website for a minute, and here is there are different versions of Linux Mint. I talked about XFCE, so let's just go to downloads and let's go to all versions. Now these first four here, this is the XFCE, this is Mate. Mate is an old interface, but people still like that. And then you've got your Cinnamon, and I would download the Cinnamon Edge ISO. It has newer drivers in it, so if you have a newer computer, it's more or less going to support that. One thing about Linux is that you really don't have to install a lot of drivers. In fact, I'm just going to go here really quick because we showed on Pop! OS how I'm going to open up the driver manager here. On Pop! OS, you choose what driver you're going to install. In Linux Mint, it'll automatically recognize an NVIDIA driver. So right now it's using the open source driver on this desktop, but if you were to do gaming, then you would want to click on use the recommended NVIDIA driver, and that's how you do that there. Okay, I just want to talk about gaming on Linux desktop, and this is my personal desktop right here that I've customized. And you'll notice I have a calendar, and I have some stuff here viewing my memory and CPU usage, so on and so forth. But what I want to talk about here for a minute is gaming. So as far as gaming goes, and I'm not showing how to do gaming in this one, we're just introducing these desktops to use. Gaming, you're talking 90-95% of all games now work on Linux, with the exception of the multiplayer ones. And that's why it's almost like 95%. And some multiplayer ones will work, some won't. It depends. Like Fortnite, their anti-cheat doesn't work with Linux. So there's several of them where it's the anti-cheats that's the problem, not the programs itself. And hopefully developers will start making it so that anti-cheats with Linux aren't going to be in the way of gaming. The more people start using the desktop, I think you're going to see more and more of that, and you're going to see more people developing applications for Linux, or porting some of the Windows applications over to Linux as more people start using the desktop. Just to give you insight on 4 desktops that I would start if you want to, that I would use if you want to start to use Linux. This is TG. Have a great day. Thanks.
Now that was easy peasy.